Hello, I'm Christina Kachukas. Welcome to Compass. Outback Australia is not the desolate place sometimes thought of. Many thousands of people are scattered throughout the bush on stations, mining operations and all types of communities. The Uniting Church Frontier Services seeks to respond to the needs of these isolated people. Tonight we meet some of these dedicated Australians who provide support and encouragement to people in remote areas.
When you're going somewhere for the first time, or when there are new people on the station, you ring up and say who you are. And quite often the reaction is, we're not very religious, mate. And before they can go on any further, I jump in and say, oh, good. I don't get on very well with very religious people.
It's not just on a spiritual level, it's friendship and, like, you know, we have meals at each other's houses and things like that. There's a real friendship's developed. And I don't like to think of the time when she's going to be sent off somewhere else, really, to tell you the truth.
Every time he came up, something went wrong. We had a generator go or a water pump go, and he happened to be very handy in those areas, and I think he thought I was this poor woman stuck out in the sticks and no man around to help with those things, and yeah, became a man for all seasons there.
They're not pastoralists. They're not cattlemen. They're people from a completely different area of life, and just somebody else to talk to about something completely different. The children love them. They're just wonderful people, and they're there if you need them.
It means a great deal to me because I wished he could come more frequent, but when he comes, we always have a Bible study and has a prayer, and it sort of connects you with nature. It just makes you feel good.
they always seem to come at the right time. And it's always a time when things are really tough or we seem to be having problems. It's like a breath of fresh air when they come in, and they're people that understand what it's like to be out here. In fact, a couple of trips ago, I was very, very busy. I had one of my girls sick, and Mary stayed behind and helped me.
Frontier Services is the remote area work or the outback work of the Uniting Church in Australia. We provide a range of community services which range from health services, outback hospitals, residential aged care services, through to student group homes and a wide range of community services on the one hand. And then on the other hand, we have the ministry side of Frontier Services, which is the work of the patrol padres. We have 15 patrols across Australia, ranging from the tropics of Cape York in the north right down to the ice and snow of the west coast of Tasmania, and across the west to Exmouth, the Gregory Patrol in the west. These are vast spaces here. It's a very big country, and padres, as they travel across those spaces, experience something of the vastness of the country. And of course the corollary to that is you feel pretty small yourself and pretty vulnerable.
Tracking 177, climbing to 3,000.
The Murchison Patrol is one of the larger ones. It covers an area of about 400,000 square kilometres. That's about 5% of Australia, to give you an idea. And we serve about 160 or slightly less than 160 stations, 20 mines, numbers of isolated prospectors, the 3 main Aboriginal communities that we visit.
I'll get it.
Now you've got to turn it on.
Turn it on, yeah.
My major job is visiting people who are isolated in the true sense. And we don't count people who live in small outback towns as isolated in comparison with the people who live on the isolated mines or on stations or in the Aboriginal communities for that matter.
My working pattern is that I'm a patrol padre for 5 days a week, but I'm back in Meekatharra on Saturday to write a sermon, and Sunday I'm delivering it somewhere.
I like to feel that I'm part of the team and that I'm helping both wives and husbands on the stations. There are times when wives have said, we don't see many women. In fact, one person burst into tears on seeing me because she hadn't seen a woman for so long. And another man who was so thrilled, who works on his own on the station, was so thrilled to know I was coming. He baked scones and put flowers out, and so you get a tremendous welcome.
The economic downturn in the bush has meant that many stations that might have had 4 or 5 families on them perhaps now only have 2. People are working flat out, particularly in the pastoral industry, with one person trying to do the work that 2 or 3 may have done before. It means there isn't quite the time for social interaction that they may have had before, and it means that some people at least are very isolated.
When the telephones were brought to the outback and replaced the Flying Doctor radio network, people became much more isolated and much lonelier because the chatter sessions that used to take place on the radio disappeared. And the telephone is an expensive instrument, as they found out very quickly, and so it's only to be used for business calls. The women in particular are more isolated.
A lot of city folk really have not got any idea of some of the problems that we're faced with. I don't feel isolated, but you're 140 miles or 224 kilometres from the nearest town, and we get a mail once a fortnight. Okay, we've got a telephone, but it's still very hard to organise the business when you're just relying on mail once a fortnight.
My patrol is based on the west coast of Tasmania. It covers an area of about 200 kilometres from one end to the other. In geographical terms, it sounds like a small patrol. But when you begin driving around it, you begin to appreciate that distance is not all there is to working an area like this. The roads can often be dangerous to driving when they are covered with frost, ice or snow. They are real factors for us for about 6 months of the year. The area is settled by 8 little different communities that are mostly mining communities, although there is one fishing village and one hydroelectricity commission village.
There's a sense of isolation. It's not the isolation that people in the outback would know, because it's not so much an isolation of distance. It's an isolation that, cultural isolation. It's very different living here on the west coast in a mining community without a lot of the facilities that people in the larger urban areas just take for granted. There's also a sense of isolation from people in those wider community who, if you mention to them, come down to the west coast, they'd be appalled. So there's an imposed sense of isolation from others as well. And it tends to make us a tight-knit community.
In the 3 years since I've been here, the major issue has been shrinking communities as a result of retrenchments in the mining industry and with the Hydroelectricity Commission. As the hydro completes its construction work on the west coast, people are gradually, in the past, have been relocated and have moved away. At the present time, as their construction work completes, then the remainder of the people involved with construction will move away within the next couple of months.
Well, when you've known someone, say, for 5 or 6 years, you've shared a lot of experiences with them, especially if they've got children as well, and you've done lots of things together. It just feels like a little bit of you's been taken away, a bit like a death, I suppose, only not quite as dramatic. But it's sad, really sad. And, I mean, there's been so many friends gone now. I can't keep count of them all. They're going, weekly now because the hydro is just about due to close up shop. Now I find when I meet new people, you tend to hold a little bit of yourself back because every time somebody leaves, it sort of chips off a bit more of your armour.
One of the advantages of being a woman in this area is that many of the issues of the area are issues that concern women. Men have their social outlets. They are associated through their sporting clubs and groups, or through the pub or the clubs, and develop a sense of mateship that is not always accessible to women. Many women in these communities are young mums with children and find themselves largely confined to their domestic situation.
The padre is often perhaps the only person who will turn up at a mining camp or a station and will be there for those people. He is there, or she is there, as their friend, as somebody who breaks down the isolation by taking the trouble to cross the distance and be there with them.
Jabiru Patrol's the newest of the patrols in Australia. It's only been operating for 3.5 years. It was felt that a patrol ought to be opened up to cover the top end. It's a fairly compact patrol. I visit cattle stations, small holdings that are growing grain, milling timber, and then of course I've got about 9 Aboriginal camps here in Kakadu that I am responsible for. Isolation can mean loneliness for some people, but some people who live in an isolated situation say they don't know what loneliness is.
How you going, Padre? Good to see you, mate.
Yes, how things going?
Oh, good, thanks. Well, I'll show you some.
Isolation, I think, that hurts people is the isolation from support systems, isolation from family, isolation from those experiences and people which nurture them and make them feel that they're a whole person.
It's not lonesome because, first of all, the wildlife keeps you quite active, and you have people like the Padre coming by, and we have a Bible study with him, and there's maybe 20 people or 25 in 100, 150 caves, but we know each other, and we keep, you may say gospel or whatever, but we keep in contact. And so you don't really get lonely, plus the fact you're busy working. This right here is not much of a setup, but I don't have time to get lonely.
So being in a remote area doesn't necessarily mean that you're deprived. I visit people in remote areas who are a long way from anybody else, who are very deeply satisfied and feel as if they're living a fulfilled life.
What amazes me, though, so many of the blokes out here, women don't come out. They don't like to live out in the bush. And that's not good for Australia. There are a number of blokes that would like to find a mate, but the women, for some reason, just don't like to come out here. But at any rate, I've got my little dog, I got a wireless, and it never bothers me. I've got a mate that comes out and helps me, and from time to time I hire one or two to help me, and that fire over there, we've had some good barbecues and good times.
Well, when we first moved out of town, I will admit it was a big shock to move into an isolated area. And for quite a time here, I was the only woman. And living in an area where we were used to having people dropping in and out all the time. And then coming here, you sort of find yourself looking out the window half the day, hoping someone will turn up to have a cup of coffee with you. But you have to come to the realisation that you are here on your own and make the most of it, and not only exist in an area like this but learn to enjoy it too. visits from Frontier Services are like, I guess, visits from other people, friends and relatives also. It's company and people dropping in for a cuppa, and whether you expect them or don't expect them, it makes no difference. It's all company and it's really appreciated.
Yeah, it's a friendship service, and it's really interesting to talk to people from such different walks of life. You also, with Frontier Services, is handy because you do find out what the neighbours are up to and how people are going elsewhere, and that's a good contact in that respect, because you get a fairly broad view quickly of what's happening in the region, and the region is huge, like many, many thousands of square kilometres.
Centralian Patrol is 650,000 square kilometres, touching into Queensland, South Australia, Western Australia, but the bulk of it is in the Territory. There are about 80 pastoral stations that we call at, 18 Aboriginal communities, all the national parks for the rangers. We're based in Alice Springs, and it's like the hub of a wheel, and so we can patrol in all directions, so that makes it a very convenient location. The work is very physically demanding too. We're on very rough terrain a lot of the time, and I think presently this vehicle's done 100,000, and I think it's lasting a lot better than I am. It doesn't seem to have as many back or neck problems as I do, but I guess that's a minor thing in one way, but good health's necessary for you to be effective in your work.
They just seem to appear out of nowhere at different times, and they curb the loneliness a fair bit, and it was great that you met such easygoing, level people, you know, they just brought this something extra into our lives while we're out here. We started Kings Creek about 11 years ago. It was vacant Crown land, and we started from scratch. It's 500 square miles, or close to. It's a cattle station, but it's made no money out of cattle at this time because it's in its infancy, I guess, more than anything. But we've made a living out of camels and tourism mainly. And I started catching camels simply for a bit of fun more than anything, I guess. And over the years, there was a demand for camels from various people. First of all, from locals around Central Australia, and gradually it's become a market overseas, and it's also, there's a fairly lucrative market within Australia.
Image that's portrayed of outback life. A lot said about the men, pioneer men, but in some respects, the recession that we've been going through and the drought has put many of today's women who are in isolated regions with children, family, fairly well back into that pioneer aspect of things.
When we first came out here, it was hard. It was probably just living from day to day. It was actually existing. I mean, we had nothing. We lived under a tree with a piece of canvas, 2 children, and carted our water and basically lived off the land. After 6 months, we built a bit of a shed and lived in that for 12 months. It was like a palace. But now, of course, you know, things have got better. Pressures are different. We've got staff to worry about, and children are educated on School of the Air. We've just had one come home, the other one's still at boarding school. And good life for the kids. They love it. Hard life of women.
The Kennedy Patrol covers the vast majority of Cape York Peninsula. We're out 3 weeks in the month, 10.5 months in the year. That's a sort of a rough average. The problems that I face are the very long distances and sometimes the extremely rough roads. There are 1 or 2 roads in the Cape, I think, that could claim to be the roughest in the world, particularly after the wet season when we have enormous washouts and trees down across the road, and we have to go travelling through the bush instead of on the road. The other problem is, of course, that we try to cover a lot of ground in one patrol, and that means that we have to carry a lot of supplies and, of course, a lot of resources to share with people when we call.
Frontier Services have been coming quite a few years now. We get a couple of visits every year. They provide us with resources for the kids, videos, books. There's resources for us. We can borrow books. David comes out and does a communion service with us, so we have that sort of thing once, a couple of times a year. And whereas when we go to town, we usually there through the week, so we don't have any sort of contact with churches, which usually operate only on Sundays.
Yeah, I think probably he came out here one year and baptised the kids down the river, which was good. We had him in the river as well. So
yeah, yeah.
Most places, will be a bit different from that. So.
Yeah, that was really nice.
When Pauline and I first started work on the Kennedy Patrol, pretty well all our visits were introductory visits and often lasted no more than half an hour or an hour. But we're finding now, after 3.5 years, that people are asking us to stay much longer. And in some cases, we have stayed anything up to 2 days. We try very hard to cover the entire Cape at least once a year. Most people will see us more than once. Some, of course, will see us more often than that.
Very busy for a woman. You've got to teach your kids, and you've got to be everything to your kids. So you've got to teach them everything from learning to swim to learning to read and write. So, and then you do a few of the men's jobs on the sides when they're away, like throwing bales of hay over fences and things like that, starting pumps and generators and that kind of thing.
An outback woman is somebody really and truly special. She teaches her children. She teaches them to ride. She musters cattle, cooks for 20 on occasions, tries to look attractive, has visitors at no notice all the time. Tourists get lost or they lose a wheel, and she has them to look after for a day or two. They are magic people, but it's a great stress on them, and not all women are ideally suited to the life.
I was raised in the bush. I went away to school and I went away nursing, but Even though it's a really hard, cruel country, you either love it or you hate it. There's no in between. And I happen to love it.
So much to these people out here, whether they've been on the land for generations or they are first generation. They've come here because they want to be in this type of situation. They will say to you time and time again, it's not the money we make, it's a way of life.
I wouldn't go back to city dwelling if it paid me. I mean, we're only an hour away from the coast these days with the new road, and I mean, we've got beautiful lake and mountain scenery, and what more can a person ask for? It's God's own country.
At times it's quite overwhelming to just sort of be sitting on the river or just walking around the trees and feel as though you really belong. It's the thing that keeps you going, I think. Because sometimes you can only see the problems, the breakdowns, and the trying to make ends meet financially and keeping things going and working hard, but. It's sort of like that feeling like you feel like you can hug a tree, and it seems really, really silly, but that's the way you feel about it sometimes, that you really feel as though you belong in this... We felt it the first time we came and sat by the river. I was born on the River Murray, so there's something about water that's relaxing and peaceful. And there's just something about this area that makes you feel as though you're really a part of it, and it's the thing that keeps you here.
If you know much about mining, many of the mines where, this is particularly true in deep mining, underground mining, you go into it and you put your ear next to the wall and you can hear moaning, sort of groaning underneath. It's the pressure of the rocks, the weight, and you can hear this noise. And then when you study rocks, you realize that the temperature and the water, I can give evidence around here how it's a continuing, changing thing, how the earth, it's really like being one gigantic being that is alive in a real sense. We don't think about it, but it appears to be that way.
When you sit down with an old miner and he waxes eloquent about the spirituality of all these rocky ridges and heaps of dirt and so on that he's lived in for years, I get quite excited, and I think, well, this is something new to me. I've never encountered this before. And so these people can be very, very deeply spiritual, and they see there is an expression of creation. There are obligations for them which are just not obligations to an administrative system and a system of money, but it's an obligation to their understanding of the spirit of creation which which exists in the rocks they hold in their hands and exists in the trees and the birds around their camps.
I think the people mainly that we visit have a natural affinity with nature. Many of them that are on the land are dependent upon the elements for their survival, and I think that there is a spirituality there. It may not necessarily be a Christian component, but I believe it's something, it's a starting place that where we must stand with the people and work from that perspective rather than the preaching and the things that may belong fairly naturally to an ordinary parish ministry. Always, I think Frontier Services, to honour its commitment to the people and to the church that it represents, must be where the people are at.
No, I'm not a very religious person. I go to church sometimes, but I guess I believe there's only one person that's going to help you and me, and that's us.
When people say that they're not very religious, that's a great opening, really, but you can't jump in feet first and take it up. But we've certainly discovered that, yes, a lot of people do say that in the bush and anywhere, I guess. But we really haven't found anybody in our travels that doesn't have a spirituality, put it that way. I wouldn't call them religious, and I don't think that's a very good word to use, really. But everybody has their own spirituality and everybody approaches it in a different way. But they all have something to share and something to learn from. And whether they're a religious person, as we term it, whether they go to a church, whether they read the Bible, is not the point. They still have a spirituality, and we can learn from each other and we can help each other.
Mount Swan Station is about 850 square miles. We run 4,000 to 5,000 head, depending on the seasons. If we've got good rainfall, we can up the carrying capacity. I guess cost is our biggest problem. Costs are skyrocketing, fuel, wages, etc. And the cattle prices are not keeping up with the costs. But we're managing to keep our head above water. The hardest thing in this country is droughts, knowing how to manage a drought. You can get droughts from 4 to 7 years. So I think, we had a 7-year drought in the 60s. In the 80s, we had about a 4 or 5 year drought. So it's just managing the cattle during those times. Oh, I've been around Australia. I went to school down south, lived down south. I've worked over in West Australia, worked in Queensland. Nothing really appeals to me because I guess it's home and I know the country and it's really a free life. I love it. It wouldn't be anywhere else. In places turning into a creek. I guess Rob, his visits are very helpful. Brings out gear if you want it. If you want to get someone christened, you can get that done. And religion comes into it too. The kids like to hear a bit about religion. No, it's just good to see. Good to have a chat to.
Our destinies, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, in remote Australia, lie together. They are interlocked. Now, I'm not talking some sort of assimilation or integration in that sort of way, but really for Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people, their destinies lie together in a sense of interdependence.
I don't really see the Aboriginals as a problem because we've lived with them all our lives. We know them. I know them very well. They know me very well. We get on really well. But there's too many people coming in and filling their heads with rubbish, and it is rubbish, a lot of it. They think they're helping them, and they're not. All we've seen since
people have came in and think that they're doing good for them. It's just a deterioration, a complete deterioration of the Aboriginals in this area.
Well, we have in trouble over work. See, most of the people, all people work here, no young people. It's only one or two here, that's all. The young people, they all lay back and they don't want to work. See, that's the trouble we have in here. See, most of the old people working here were not supposed to do. The young people just laying back, they don't want to work, see.
They have to be allowed to learn for themselves by their mistakes, and we cannot continue to always push things on them or do things for them. We have to walk alongside them, to be prepared to affirm them, to be prepared to help when they ask us, not when we think we ought to.
The men that I have here are full-blood Aboriginal fellows that simply work hard and pay their taxes and don't want to be regarded as something special because they're Aboriginal. They believe their Aboriginality is special, but they don't want to be categorised in a certain way to make them sort of put up on a pedestal somewhere where people will gawk at them and say, oh, well, they're Aboriginal, we ought to do this or to do that for them.
Young people, they're really lost today, really. There's no one trying, see? There's no one trying. They're very hard to get them going on this sort of job because free and easy, with the government easy, and easy with money with the families.
Right, right, yeah. So how often does that happen? A lot of the money that flows into Aboriginal communities is used on alcohol, and personally I believe that's a real tragedy for the Aboriginal people. I think of an Aboriginal man that I heard of last year who said, I'm not going to drink anymore, it's not in my culture. And you know, if that could take root, I believe that they would be really on their way to having full control for themselves.
As I sit down and talk to Aborigines, and I try to get in touch with their spirituality, they reveal themselves to me as people who understand so much of what I believe and treasure from an Aboriginal perspective, and then they add to that the Christian faith, and it becomes richer for them and richer for the rest of us as well. The Aboriginal concept of please come and sit by my campfire overnight, which says take time with me, please. I've learned to slow down. They've taught me to slow down, and in slowing down, my tunnel vision is changing to a broader perspective. I'm really falling in love with these people. And in falling in love with them, I'm beginning to hurt with them and hurt for them. And I have times I don't feel all that proud of who and what I am.
Certainly a special breed. Yes, there are some fantastic people out there, really colourful characters, really genuine people, a lot of hurting people, a lot of people with many, many problems, but they're still very special people. I don't think we've met anybody in our travels at all that we can't say we've learnt something from and gained something from the relationship.
Bush people are, they don't wear masks. As occasionally city people do. And when they become friends, they really become friends.
The people out in the outback are not rich squatters sitting around on their verandas drinking Flanders rums and things. They are dinkum Aussie battlers who work extremely hard, and they are, I suppose, in a sense, the traditional Australians, and they're still living out what Australians understand themselves to be and often are not.
People say it's the way of life, but I think these days you've got to be mad for the way of life because there's so much work involved. And there's no reward in it, no, financially I don't think anyone in the land's going anywhere at the moment. But still, I do enjoy being out here. There's something about it, I guess, you can't explain.
They are fiercely independent, but they're compassionate people. And I find that if I go out to a bush family and I accept them for what they are, they accept me for what I am, non-judgmentally. They don't say, oh, well, you're the minister, you're the padre, so you're this kind of guy. They wait for me to reveal myself to them. The main thing I've learned is that when I go out into the bush and I meet a whole range of people, some who are committed Christians, many who are not, and some who really aren't interested in the Christian faith but are very happy for me to visit. The thing that I've learned is that I don't have the right to share my faith and my spirituality with them until I've taken the time to sit down with them and develop a relationship of trust and respect. And as they share their spirituality with me, they also give me permission to share my faith with them.
There are people that really do look forward to Malcolm and Judy's visit. Their ministry is so important to people out here. Maybe those people haven't got any connection with the church or haven't had any religious upbringing, but they really, really care about, and Judy and Malcolm care about them.
I heard that said the night. And he was coming out.
There have been times when it's been very difficult. I think, I guess times when you feel as though you've reached the end of the road, or we thought was the end of the road, and wondered whether we should just give up. And Judy and Malcolm have been in and able to sort of share some of those, or just be a sounding board. And they are a part of, but apart from the situation, and they're able to sort of come in and just listen, shed a few tears together, and get the strength to go on.
Well, we believe that padres are a special breed of people. It's hard to say that there is one trait or other that characterises all of them, but of course they've got to have the capacity to be self-starters. They've got to be very highly motivated. They've got to be able to get up and get out and be amongst people. I think above all they've got to love people. I don't say that in a sloppy sense, but in a sense of being genuinely interested in people and being with people, because basically it's a people work. It's interacting with people. It is being there for them that is the essence of being a patrol padre.
You don't really call anywhere home. It's one of those jobs where you're constantly on the move, constantly walking with people and trying to identify with where they're hurting, sharing their joys and their pain and their sorrow.
She's an ideal person for a community like this, because so many people, while not actually mistrusting the church, are certainly suspicious of it, and yet with Colleen they are able to contact her and use her in a time of need where other churches, or particularly men, they didn't feel comfortable doing that. So Colleen has filled a very large void, particularly in the role as counsellor on the West Coast, because people, although they recognise that she is a minister of the uniting church, they also see her as someone they can trust and feel comfortable with in counselling situations.
It's a mobile sort of ministry. I'm not in these places, I'm not settled in any of those places, and none of them sort of see me other than a visit once every 2 months. But in some communities I am the only clergy to visit. Frontier Services has this attitude that in communities the church should be the first in and the last out and respond to need and not to numbers.
When we visit, we bring the church to them, and for that reason you have to be very sensitive to let people either come into the church or stay outside, as it were. In the suburbs you can go in or you can walk past. So I don't come the hard sell, I'm there. But when I visit, they know that the church is there, and if they want to walk in the door, well, the opportunity is there. Sometimes we say a prayer, sometimes we run a service. More often, we just talk.
I was going through a very busy period of shearing, and my father passed away, and I still had a week of shearing to go. And shearing is your major commitment on your property, and so therefore I had to battle on shearing, knowing that my dear dad had gone, and being very close to him, that was very difficult. But you know, you make a phone call and you just sort of say to, you know, a bloke like Bob, gee, things are tough, and oh yeah, they sure are, Rod. You know, what else is tough? And I said, oh, you know, Dad's died, you know, and still got a week of shearing to go. And I mean, I don't even remember what he said, but I got off the telephone and out into the yards and kept drafting sheep, and, you know, without wanting to make it sound too simplistic, that's the sort of man he is. He's there when needed, and to me that makes a person very valuable.
I think the main role of the patrol padre is to identify problems and report on them. I am, in many ways, the social services for the people that I visit, the marriage counsellor. But the first point of contact is the patrol padre on many of these social issues.
Sometimes it's very frustrating because people face some enormous problems that we can't do anything about. And the only thing that we can do is to be a listening friend. And I guess that's what it's all about, is to be as much a friend to people as we possibly can, and to, rather than to try and Bible bash them, to allow them to see Christ in us.
Next week on Compass, we go to Canberra's Catholic Cathedral for the inauguration of the National Council of Churches. This special event marks the entry of the Catholic Church into the Australian Council of Churches. That's Compass, next Sunday night at 10:30.